I'm joined now by writer at Mother Jones and author of Minority Rule, Ari Berman. Ari, thanks for joining me again.
Brian, great to talk to you again. Thank you.
So I want to talk about the different ways as we look toward this upcoming midterm election that Donald Trump may be positioning himself to try and rig the 2026 election. This is a beat that you have been on for a long time. You've done excellent work with Mother Jones on exactly this point. So there are a number of ways, but I want to start first and foremost with Mike Johnson's refusal to seat Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva into the House. How could this particular instance kind of serve as a microcosm for Mike Johnson and Trump and Republicans' broader plans to refuse to seat any Democrats as we look toward the next election?
Yeah, I looked in a recent cover story from Mother Jones at 10 different ways that Trump is rigging the midterms. And the last way, which is if all else fails, just refuse to seat the Democrats that win. And so I think the fight about seating Grijalva isn't just about the Epstein files. It's about getting ready to have a playbook that if there's a close election to the House and the outcome is somehow not determined right after the election, November 2026, and Trump and Republicans allege fraud, which you know they will if they're losing, that will somehow increase pressure on Johnson not to sit Democratic members of the House if there's somehow one or two or three seats, like in this case, that would make the difference between Democratic and Republican control or Democrats and Republicans joining together to actually have real power.
You know, Democrats will look at this and say, well, you have to. Well, those are the rules. Well, it wouldn't be fair otherwise. Do you think that we are positioning ourselves kind of in the wrong mindset by appealing to this concept of fairness or what's right and wrong when Republicans aren't really playing that same game?
I mean, Republicans have already incited an insurrection to try to overturn an election. And I mean, the thing that disturbed me.
So are you saying that fairness is not necessarily a virtue that would be an effective appeal?
I think it's difficult to think that just the better angels are going to prevail here. I think you always have to look at how far could Republicans go to try to rig the political process and undermine democratic norms to protect their power and to keep themselves in power. And we've seen how far Trump has been willing to go to retain the House in 2026. I mean, he's telling state after state after state, redraw your maps mid-decade in an unprecedented way so that I don't lose the House majority. So then if the House majority was within one or two or three seats and Trump is alleging widespread fraud, let's just say, for example, that we don't know who wins the House on election night 2026. And the result depends on a few races in California, right? And it takes a little bit longer than usual to count those ballots. You absolutely are going to imagine that Trump is going to allege widespread fraud there based on no proof, because he's already done that before. And they're going to say to Mike Johnson, don't seat these Democratic members from California. And if those Democratic members would be the difference in the House being controlled by Democrats instead of Republicans, you could absolutely imagine a situation in which the Republicans say, we're going to find some kind of legal loophole that will allow us not to seat these people. Now, this would certainly be contested, and I'm not sure it would work, but you're already seeing with the failure to seat Grijalva that they can drag this out, create uncertainty, and this would be the stakes would be a lot higher here because it's not just about a petition to discharge the Epstein files. It would actually be control of the House that's at stake.
Right. And we've, by the way, seen them use a strategy similar to this before. I mean, when it comes to, these claims of a stolen election, Trump just wanted an announcement that the election was rigged. And he said, we'll take it from there. Sometimes just getting the ball going and delaying for the sake of delay will allow them the space to kind of entrench the narrative that they want to put forward. And once they start to plant that seed of disinformation, we've seen the ways in which it can grow. And the longer that these processes last, the more that they can manipulate people into believing that there was, some nefarious behavior happening.
I saw that in 2020. I kept thinking there would be some point at which this ended. And it just never ended. It just got worse and worse and worse in terms of what people believed. And now they're even more primed than they were before to believe that Democrats can only win by cheating and that all elections are rigged if Republicans don't win. And so it's already predetermined within the Republican Party that they're not going to treat Democratic wins as legitimate. And so why would we believe that a party that didn't willingly cede power once before is going to willingly cede power again?
So you had mentioned that you'd gone over a whole list of ways in which Republicans and Trump can seek to undermine the upcoming election. We jumped to, I think, one of the most nefarious ways, the last one. But can you talk about some of the other ways that you discussed, aside from outright just refusing to seat anybody who is not a Republican?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. I think that one of the overarching themes is Trump taking control of the federal election process in a way that he doesn't actually have the power to do, that states and Congress are supposed to oversee the elections, but Trump is inserting himself in a lot of different ways, whether it's through leaning on states to gerrymander or using the Justice Department to do all sorts of things, including go after his political opponents, to potentially trying to incite violence and intimidation at the polls. I mean, one thing that I was really concerned of when I was initially reporting this piece, Trump had deployed the National Guard to LA, right? And that really freaked out a lot of people in the voting rights space because they said, what if he does things like puts National Guard at polling places? What if he sends ICE into immigrant neighborhoods where there's lots of Democrats? Well, those things are less and less hypothetical now, right? Yeah. Because we've seen it happen. We've seen the National Guard deployments in lots of different states. We have seen what they've done in the wake of the death of Charlie Kirk, right? Where they've been much more outspoken and aggressive in trying to crack down on the left. We've seen people like Steve Bannon say, we're going to have ICE at polling places. We've seen Cleta Mitchell, the Trump lawyer who tried to overturn the election, saying Trump's going to declare an emergency to try to take control of federal elections. I mean, a lot of people dismiss this stuff in the run up to 2020 when Trump said things like this, and then he actually did it. So when Trump advisors themselves are saying he's going to declare a national emergency to take control of elections, he's going to put ICE at polling places, I take this very seriously.
You know, something that I was particularly concerned and remain particularly concerned about is this idea of having these troops deployed to different places. I understand that right now, what he's trying to do isn't necessarily just to kind of flex his autocratic muscles and deploy the troops because he really cares about crime. This is to give himself a legal framework to be able to deploy the troops later when it actually matters, when it comes time to vote in these elections. Because if you look at 2020, for example, there are things he wanted to do. There are schemes that he tried to carry out, like, for example, seizing the voting machines in Georgia. He wasn't able to do that, in part because he didn't have buy-in from folks at the law enforcement agencies. Bill Barr said his claims of a stolen election were bullshit, but he doesn't have that problem now. Now he's got Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. All of these people are there. Not only because they're going to be soft on election denialism, but expressly because they are election deniers. But now imagine that he has boots on the ground. Now imagine he has, a standing army, literally answerable only to him. And so if he says we need to seize the voting machines in Democratic population centers like Atlanta or Philly or Detroit or Milwaukee, Are those people going to say, no, sir, we can't do that? Are those people going to say we don't have the authority? And even if you do find one person, in the ranks that says, no, we can't do this, this is extrajudicial, they're going to find the next person who will be perfectly content to follow their orders and do exactly what he asks. And so to what extent are you concerned about the prospect of Trump deploying these troops now to give himself some legal framework that he can then use as we get closer to the elections?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big difference between Trump 2 and Trump 1 is systematically getting rid of anyone who would stand up to the president. And as you said, putting people in there who are not just going to effectuate what he wants to do, but who willingly want to carry this kind of thing out and supported the effort to do so in 2020. And I absolutely believe that the troops are there in all of these places to lay the groundwork for intervention in the election if that's what Trump wants, because he's already weaponized the military in a way that would have been unthinkable. I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if President Biden did something like this and sent troops to Republican states, sent troops to Texas, for example, what the blowback would have been. So what Trump is doing now is he's normalizing things that are deeply abnormal throughout the political system. I mean, sending troops to blue states or just having every state redraw their maps because you want to give Republicans more seats. I mean, these are totally abnormal, ahistorical things for a president to do. And he's just doing them over and over so that we become numb to them. That when he uses, for example, the troops in another context, people say, well, he's already done this kind of thing before. So I think it would be extremely disturbing for him to do this. I believe it would be illegal for him to do it. But the question you ask is who's going to stand up and stop him? It's hard to know who that would be in his administration, at least.
Are there any other instances of Trump weaponizing the DOJ as a means to interfere in the 2026 or 28 elections?
Yeah, one of the things the Trump DOJ is doing right now, in addition to retaliating against Trump's political opponents, is they've started requesting and demanding in lawsuits sensitive voter data from what eventually will be all 50 states. And remember, when Trump had this election integrity commission and after the 2016 election, when he claimed that 3 million people voted illegally in California, and that's why he lost the popular vote, they tried to do something similar, this quote unquote Pence-Kobach commission. And they were basically laughed out of the room, including by many Republicans. The Secretary of State of Mississippi famously told Kobach to go jump in the Gulf of Mexico when we still called it that. Now, the Justice Department is doing the same kind of thing, and they've already sued 9 states, almost all of which are blue states. And they're trying to get private information on every voter in America, things like social security numbers and voter history and partisan affiliation, so that they can basically create this national voter registry, which has never been done by the federal government before, so they can try to, run these data through unreliable databases to search for fraud. They're not going to find any fraud, but you can imagine them misusing the data in such a way to say, we finally found the evidence of fraud that President Trump's been talking about all along. Right. But also then if they do so, that's going to put pressure on states to purge voters from their rolls in advance of the midterms. It could lead to the Justice Department charging election officials with crimes, which is something they've said they want to do. And so I think that the Justice Department is going to use the playbook of retaliating against Trump's political opponents to then intervene in the midterms in a way that we've never seen before, electing different kinds of people to all of these different offices. And I think that's one thing that people are starting to engage in. And I think that will be a way to grow the resistance in a meaningful way as we head into 2026.
You can read Ari's work in Mother Jones, and I highly recommend Minority Rule, the book that Ari wrote. I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Ari, as always, thank you so much for the time. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Thanks so much, Brian. Great to talk to you again.